Marcus Chen's workshop aboard orbital station Artemis wasn't what most people expected from humanity's most renowned sculptor. While other artists opted for pristine white studios with panoramic views of Earth, Marcus preferred the cramped confines of Deck 7, Section C, a former maintenance bay he'd converted into his personal sanctuary. The space was filled with the soft hum of containment fields and the sharp scent of nanoclay, a substance that cost more per gram than most precious metals. The workshop's walls were lined with sealed display cases containing his most successful experiments, sculptures that seemed to defy physics, pieces that changed their form based on the viewer's position, works that appeared solid but could pass through each other like ghosts. Each represented months of painstaking work with the experimental medium, countless failed attempts, and breakthroughs that had revolutionized the art world. Marcus stood before his workbench, protective goggles pushed up into his graying hair as he manipulated a floating sphere of nanoclay with careful gestures. At 53, his hand showed the wear of decades of traditional sculpting before he'd discovered this new medium, calused, scared, but steady as a surgeon's. The clay responded to his movements, shifting and flowing like liquid mercury, but maintaining whatever shape he commanded. The door chime interrupted his concentration. Marcus sighed, carefully securing the clay in its containment field before calling out. Workshops closed for commissions. Check back next month. I'm not here for a commission. The voice that responded was melodious but strange, with harmonics that human vocal cords couldn't produce. I'm here to learn. Marcus turned to find a figure standing in his doorway that challenged his understanding of anatomy. The alien was roughly humanoid but seemed to be composed of interlocking crystalline plates that shifted and realigned with each movement. Their surface caught the workshop's harsh lighting and broke it into rainbow patterns that danced across the walls. The being's face was a smooth oval of opalescent material with no discernible features except for what might have been eyes. Deep pools of swirling color. I'm Zira, the alien said, their voice creating subtle resonances in the workshop's metal walls. I've traveled 17 light years to study with you. Marcus crossed his arms, studying his unexpected visitor. I don't take students. Haven't for 15 years. Besides, your people. Chrysalids, right? You can manipulate matter at the molecular level, naturally. What could you possibly need to learn from me? Zira moved further into the workshop, their crystalline form flowing like liquid glass. That's precisely why I'm here. My people create by instinct, by genetic memory. We shape matter as easily as humans breathe. But there's no, they paused, seemingly searching for the right word, soul in it. No struggle, no discovery. Your work with nanoclay, it's different. You understand the medium in a way that transcends mere manipulation. You give it life. Marcus snorted, though he couldn't help feeling flattered. Pretty words, but I've seen chrysalid art. Your galleries put ours to shame. Your sculptures exist in dimensions we can barely perceive. Technical perfection without heart is just geometry, Zira replied, reaching out to touch one of the display cases. Their crystalline fingers created harmonic resonances with the containment field. I want to learn how to create art that speaks, that moves people, not just exercises in spatial mathematics. Marcus turned back to his workbench, trying to hide his intrigue. It would be starting from scratch. Worse than scratch. You'd have to unlearn everything you know about matter manipulation. Work with your hands, not your molecular control abilities. It would be frustrating, possibly even painful. Good, Zira said simply. That's exactly what I want. The old sculptor picked up a small sphere of nanoclay, rolling it between his fingers as he considered. The material responded to his touch, forming complex patterns before settling back into a perfect sphere. Finally, he turned back to Zira. One test, he said. Take this clay and make something. Anything. But you can only use your hands, no molecular manipulation. Just shape it like a human would have to. You get 1 hour. Zira's crystalline form shifted in what might have been excitement or nervousness. They reached for the clay with fingers that trembled slightly. The moment they touched it, Marcus could see them fighting their natural instincts. The clay wanted to respond to their innate abilities, to reshape itself at the molecular level. But Zira forced themselves to work it manually, pressing and shaping with increasingly frustrated movements. An hour later, what sat on the workbench could generously be called abstract art. The clay showed signs of stress, places where Zira's control had slipped and molecular manipulation had started to occur before being forcibly stopped. The overall effect was rough, chaotic, and utterly imperfect. It was also, Marcus had to admit, interesting. There was something in the struggle between precision and chaos, between natural ability and forced limitation, that spoke to him. He could see the potential there, raw and unrefined as it was. "You failed spectacularly," he said finally. Zira's crystalline form dimmed slightly. "I understand. Thank you for the opportunity." "I wasn't finished," Marcus interrupted. "You failed spectacularly. But you failed in exactly the right way. You fought your instincts. You struggled. You made something ugly but honest." He wiped his hands on his work apron and fixed Zira with a stern look. "Be here tomorrow at 600 station time. Bring nothing but your willingness to learn everything again from the beginning. And Zira, yes, this won't be easy. I'm not a gentle teacher." The alien's crystalline form brightened, sending rainbow patterns dancing across the workshop. "I wouldn't want you to be." As Zira left, Marcus turned back to the misshapen lump of clay they'd created. He picked it up, studying it from different angles. Yes, there was definitely something there, a spark of potential that had nothing to do with molecular manipulation and everything to do with the fundamental struggle of creation. Perhaps teaching again wouldn't be such a bad thing after all. He had a feeling things in his workshop were about to get very interesting indeed. Over the next few weeks, Marcus's workshop became a battleground between instinct and discipline. Each morning, Zira arrived precisely at 600, their crystalline form catching the first rays of artificial dawn that filtered through the station's hull. And each morning, Marcus found new ways to challenge their innate abilities. "Again," Marcus said, watching as Zira struggled with a simple sphere of nanoclay. "You're still trying to control it at the molecular level. I can see your crystalline structure resonating with it. Use your hands. Feel the clay's resistance. Work with it. Don't command it." Zira's frustration manifested in ripples of color through their crystalline form. "This is inefficient, imprecise. With molecular manipulation, I could create perfect symmetry, flawless structure." "That's exactly the problem," Marcus interrupted, taking the clay from them. His scarred hands moved with practiced confidence, shaping the sphere into a rough human face. "Look at this. See the imperfections. The slightly uneven eyes, the asymmetrical curve of the mouth. That's what makes it interesting. That's what makes it human." "But it's flawed," Zira protested. "It's alive," Marcus corrected. "Perfect symmetry exists in mathematics, not art. Here, feel this." He guided Zira's crystalline fingers along the contours of the face. "Feel how each irregularity tells a story, how each imperfection adds character." As Zira's fingers traced the sculpture, something unexpected happened. Where their crystalline touch met the nanoclay, tiny patterns formed, not from molecular manipulation, but from the natural resonance between their alien biology and the responsive material. The patterns weren't perfect or planned. They were organic, chaotic, beautiful. Marcus seized on the discovery. "There, that's what I've been trying to show you. Your natural abilities aren't a hindrance. They're just another tool. But they have to work in harmony with physical craft, not override it." Over the following days, they experimented with this new technique. Zira learned to let their crystalline form interact naturally with the nanoclay while still shaping it primarily by hand. The results were unlike anything either of them had seen before. Sculptures that combined human organic aesthetics with alien crystalline patterns, each piece unique and impossible to replicate. Word of their collaboration spread through the station. Artists, collectors, and curiosity seekers began finding excuses to pass by the workshop, hoping to glimpse their works in progress. Marcus turned them all away, protective of this fragile new process they were developing. But one afternoon, as Zero worked on a particularly challenging piece, they asked the question Marcus had been dreading. Why did you stop teaching before? Marcus's hand stilled on his own work. For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the containment fields. I had a student, he finally said. Brilliant one. She pushed the boundaries of nanoclay sculpture further than anyone had before. Created pieces that should have been impossible. But she wasn't satisfied with pushing boundaries. She wanted to eliminate them completely. Zira's crystalline form shifted in a way that suggested intense interest. What happened? She tried to merge with the clay at a molecular level. Thought she could control it from the inside out. The containment field failed. Marcus ran a hand through his gray hair. We got her out, eventually. But she's never sculpted again. Never even touched clay. That's when I decided some boundaries aren't meant to be broken. Is that why you were reluctant to teach me? Zira asked softly. Because my natural abilities might tempt me down the same path. Marcus nodded. Partly. But you surprised me, Zira. You're not trying to conquer the medium. You're learning to dance with it. There's a huge difference. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent message ping. Marcus checked the display, and his eyes widened. Well, he said, speaking of boundaries, the Galactic Arts Council wants to see our work. Apparently, word of our little experiments has reached further than I thought. Zira's form flickered with nervous energy. Are we ready for that kind of attention? Marcus looked around the workshop at their recent pieces, sculptures that defied easy categorization, works that spoke of both human limitation and alien potential, pieces that could only exist through true collaboration. No, he said with a grin, we're not ready at all. But sometimes the best art comes from being pushed before you think you're ready. He picked up a fresh block of nanoclay. Let's give them something they've never seen before. As they began work on their most ambitious piece yet, Marcus couldn't help but reflect on how far they'd both come. He taught Zira about the value of imperfection and physical craft, but she taught him something too. That true innovation comes not from rejecting advanced capabilities, but from finding ways to make them serve traditional artistry. Together, they were writing a new chapter in the history of sculpture, one that proved that the future of art lay not in choosing between human craft and alien ability, but in finding ways to combine the best of both. The real question was the art world ready for what they were about to show them? The Galactic Arts Council's exhibition hall made Marcus's workshop look like a storage closet. Soaring crystal arches stretched hundreds of meters overhead, their surfaces displaying ever-changing artworks from across known space. Representatives from dozens of species moved through the space, their forms ranging from vaguely humanoid to completely abstract. Marcus adjusted his formal attire, a simple black suit that felt stiff after weeks in his workshop clothes. Beside him, Zira's crystalline form had been polished to an almost blinding shine, refracting the hall's ambient light in mesmerizing patterns. Remember, Marcus muttered as they approached their designated exhibition space, let the work speak for itself. No explanations, no apologies. Their sculptures were already in place, each contained within its own specialized field. The pieces they'd chosen represented the full evolution of their collaboration. From Zira's first awkward attempts at physical sculpting to their latest works that seamlessly blended human craft with crystalline resonance. The first viewers were already gathering, their reactions ranging from obvious confusion to intense fascination. A tall, serpentine being with iridescent scales spent nearly an hour studying a piece they titled Echo of Touch, a sculpture that captured the moment of contact between human fingers and crystalline form in nanoclay. Fascinating approach, a voice said behind them. They turned to find curator Ven, one of the most influential art critics in the galaxy. The curator's form was a constantly shifting cloud of metallic particles that coalesced into a rough humanoid shape. Though I must admit, I'm puzzled by your deliberate use of imperfection. The imperfections are the point, Marcus started to explain, but he was interrupted by the arrival of another figure, one that made Zira's crystalline form dim noticeably. First Scholar Lissith, Zira said, their voice carrying harmonic undertones of distress. I didn't expect the Chrysalid High Council to take interest in this exhibition. The new arrival was a chrysalid like Zira, but where Zira's form was relatively simple and elegant, Lissith was a complex geometry of intersecting crystal planes that hurt the human eye to look at directly. When they spoke, their voice resonated at frequencies that made Marcus's teeth ache. How could we not take interest when one of our own chooses to debase themselves with primitive physical manipulation? Lissith moved closer to one of the sculptures, their crystalline form radiating disapproval. You have taken our gift of molecular control and deliberately suppressed it. For what? To create these flawed, limited pieces. Marcus stepped forward, anger overriding his diplomatic intentions. These flawed pieces represent a completely new form of artistic expression. The combination of human craftsmanship and chrysalid resonance is a waste of potential. Lissith cut him off. The chrysalid art forms have been perfected over millennia. We create in dimensions your species can barely comprehend, and yet you've convinced young Zira to abandon all of that in favor of manual labor. I chose this, Zira said quietly but firmly. I sought out Marcus because I saw something in his work that all our technical perfection lacks. Soul, emotion, the mark of the artist's hand. And that's exactly what makes these pieces revolutionary. A new voice joined the conversation. They turned to find a small, elderly human woman making her way toward them, leaning on an antique wooden cane. Despite her frail appearance, her eyes were sharp and intense. Dr. Sarah Chen, she introduced herself with a slight bow. I represent the Terra Nova Art Institute. We've been following your collaboration with great interest. She turned to address Lissith directly. Your people's artistic achievements are indeed remarkable, First Scholar. But art isn't just about technical perfection. It's about capturing the ineffable qualities of experience and emotion. These pieces do exactly that. She gestured to the sculpture nearest them, where nano-clay had been shaped by human hands, but carried the subtle resonance patterns of chrysalid touch. Look at how the material responds to both species' influences. The clay holds not just form but memory, the memory of being shaped, of being touched, of being transformed. It's a physical representation of cross-species collaboration that goes beyond mere technique. Lissith's crystalline form shifted in what might have been discomfort. The technical skill involved is admittedly intriguing, but to encourage a chrysalid to work in such a limited way. Limited? Dr. Chen laughed softly. These pieces exist in multiple dimensional states simultaneously, something that neither human craft nor chrysalid manipulation could achieve alone. It's precisely the combination of both approaches that makes them unique. Marcus watched as more viewers gathered around them, the debate drawing attention from across the exhibition hall. He could see the way different species responded to their work, some focusing on the technical aspects, others drawn to the emotional resonance, but all of them engaged and curious. A small smile crossed his face as he realized something. They'd already won. Whether Lissith and the Chrysalid Council approved or not, their work had started a conversation that couldn't be ignored. They'd proven that the future of art lay not in choosing between different approaches, but in finding ways to combine them into something new. As the debate continued around them, Marcus caught Zira's eye. Their crystalline form had brightened again, confidence returning. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they'd face them together, two artists from vastly different worlds, united by their belief in the power of imperfect, honest creation. The aftermath of the Galactic Arts Council exhibition hit like a supernova. Within days, Marcus's usually quiet workshop had become the center of an artistic storm. Critics, collectors, and curious onlookers from across the galaxy demanded to see more of their revolutionary work. But with recognition came pressure, and pressure had a way of finding weak points. Marcus found Zira in the workshop, well past midnight station time, their crystalline form dimmed to near opacity as they struggled with a piece of nano-clay. The material wasn't just refusing to cooperate, it was actively destabilizing, threatening to break down at a molecular level. "You're forcing it too hard," Marcus said softly, moving to stabilize the containment field. "Your molecular control is bleeding through again." Because this primitive physical manipulation isn't enough, Zira's voice carried harmonics of frustration that made the workshop's metal walls vibrate. First Scholar Lissith was right. I'm working with one arm tied behind my back, denying my true capabilities. Marcus watched as Zira's crystalline form shifted erratically, a sign of deep emotional disturbance among their species. "What happened?" he asked, though he suspected he already knew. "The High Council contacted me. They're concerned about my regression into primitive techniques. They believe I'm wasting my potential, embarrassing our people." Zira's form stabilized slightly, but their voice remained strained. "They've offered to sponsor my return to advanced dimensional sculpture, under Lissith's personal guidance." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Marcus turned to his workbench, absently running his scurred fingers over various tools. "And what do you want?" "I don't know anymore." The containment field flickered as Zira's emotional state affected nearby electronics. "When I came here, everything seemed so clear. I wanted to learn something new, something different. But now..." They gestured at their latest failed attempt. "Maybe I was fooling myself. Maybe you can't really combine such different approaches to creation." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, considering his next words carefully. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and intense. "Let me tell you something about human art history. For centuries, people thought you had to choose between realism and abstraction, between tradition and innovation, between different schools of thought. But the artists who really changed things, they were the ones who said, 'Why choose?'" He picked up the destabilizing piece of nano-clay, letting it flow between his fingers. "Look at this material. It's not clay in any traditional sense. It's not even matter as we commonly understand it. But we still call it clay because it connects us to something ancient and fundamental, the act of shaping, of creating with our hands." "But my hands aren't like yours," Zira said softly. "They're crystalline structures capable of molecular manipulation. Every time I touch the clay, I have to fight my natural abilities." "Then stop fighting them." Marcus stepped closer, holding out the clay. "You're not human, Zira. You never will be. And that's exactly why your art matters. You bring something to this process that I never could, not just your molecular control, but your entirely different way of perceiving and interacting with matter. The Council doesn't see it that way. They see it as a step backward, because they're looking at it through a single lens. They see art as a progression from simple to complex, from physical to conceptual. But that's not how art really works." Marcus shaped the clay into a rough sphere. "Art is about expression, about finding new ways to share how we see and feel the world. Sometimes that means using advanced techniques, sometimes it means getting your hands dirty." Zira's form brightened slightly as they considered his words. "When I first saw your work," they said slowly, "what drew me wasn't the technical skill. It was the sense of presence. Each piece felt like it carried a piece of you within it. I wanted to learn how to do that." "And you have," Marcus insisted. "Look at what we've created together. These aren't just sculptures. They're conversations between species, between different ways of understanding reality itself." "But what if it's not enough?" Zira's form dimmed again. "What if we've reached the limit of what this combination can achieve?" Marcus smiled, a glint of challenge in his eyes. "Then we push past it, not by rejecting either approach, but by going deeper into both." He held out the clay again. Show me how a chrysalid would shape this, not by suppressing your abilities, but by truly combining them with what you've learned here. Zira hesitated, then reached for the clay. This time, they didn't fight their natural resonance with the material. Instead, they let it flow through their crystalline form while simultaneously working the clay with physical movements. The result was immediate and stunning. The clay began to shift and flow in ways that seemed to defy physics, while maintaining the organic, emotional quality that characterized their best work. "There," Marcus said softly. "That's not a compromise between two techniques. That's something entirely new." As they worked together into the station's artificial night, both could feel something shifting, evolving. They weren't just pushing boundaries anymore. They were erasing them entirely, creating a new artistic language that spoke of both human determination and alien perspective. The question was, would the rest of the galaxy be ready to hear what they had to say? The day of the Terra Nova Art Institute's grand exhibition arrived with both anticipation and tension. Marcus and Zira had spent weeks preparing their most ambitious piece yet, one that would either validate their entire collaboration or prove their critics right. The exhibition hall of Terra Nova Station dwarfed even the Galactic Arts Council's space, its transparent dome offering a breathtaking view of Earth below. First Scholar Lissith and several members of the Chrysalid High Council had arrived early, their complex crystalline forms creating interference patterns in the air. Dr. Chen stood nearby, her ancient wooden cane tapping thoughtfully against the polished floor. In the center of the hall, a massive containment field hummed quietly, currently opaque to hide their work in progress. Marcus checked the field's settings one final time, while Zira's form shifted through various harmonics of nervous energy. "Are you sure about this?" Zira asked quietly. "If it fails, then it fails spectacularly," Marcus finished with a slight smile. "But it won't. We've pushed past our breaking point, remember. Found something new on the other side." Dr. Chen stepped forward, addressing the gathered crowd. "Today, we witness an unprecedented collaboration between human craftsmanship and chrysalid ability. Marcus Chen and Zira have entitled their piece, Convergence, a work that exists simultaneously in physical space and quantum states." First Scholar Lissith's voice cut through the murmurs. "A bold claim. The manipulation of quantum states has been the exclusive domain of chrysalid art for millennia. Perhaps it's time for that to change," Marcus said, moving to the containment field's controls. He looked at Zira, who nodded. Together, they deactivated the opacity. The gasps were audible. Within the field, a massive sculpture of nanoclay hung in space, but to call it simply a sculpture would be like calling a supernova a light show. The piece moved and flowed, constantly shifting between states of matter. At its core, human hands had shaped basic forms, faces, bodies, abstract shapes that spoke of emotion and experience. But these physical forms were overlaid with crystalline patterns that extended into dimensions barely perceptible to human eyes. Zira stepped forward, their crystalline form resonating with the piece. Where their natural energy met the sculpture, new patterns emerged, quantum states that carried emotional resonance. Marcus moved to join them, his hands working with practiced skill to shape and guide the physical clay. The two artists moved in perfect synchronization, each complementing the other's work. "Impossible," Lissith whispered. "The quantum states should destabilize the physical form. The physical manipulation should disrupt the quantum patterns. That's what makes it revolutionary," Dr. Chen said, her eyes shining. "They're not fighting each other. They're creating harmony between seemingly incompatible states of being." The sculpture continued to evolve as Marcus and Zira worked. Human viewers found themselves drawn to the physical forms, the emotional resonance of shaped clay. Chrysalids and other advanced species could perceive the complex quantum interactions, the way the piece existed in multiple dimensional states. But all of them could feel something new happening, a bridge being built between different ways of perceiving reality. "This is what art should be," Marcus said, not taking his eyes off their work. Not a competition between techniques or traditions, but a conversation between different ways of seeing and creating. A conversation that changes both participants. Zira added, their form glowing brightly as they manipulated quantum states while maintaining physical contact with the clay. First, Scholar Lissith moved closer, their complex form shifting in what might have been surprise or recognition. You haven't abandoned our ways, they said to Zira. You've expanded them, added something we never considered. The human element, Dr. Chen said with a smile. The willingness to work within limitations, to embrace imperfection as a source of beauty, combined with chrysalid precision and quantum manipulation, it creates something entirely new. The sculpture had reached its final form, or rather, its final state of continuous transformation. It would never be static, never be finished in any traditional sense. Like the collaboration that created it, it would continue to evolve, to spark new conversations and possibilities. Marcus stepped back, his hands covered in clay, and looked at Zira. Their crystalline form was radiant with achievement and possibility. So, he said with a grin, ready to start teaching the next generation. I hear there are quite a few artists, both human and chrysalid, interested in learning this new approach. Zira's form shifted in what was definitely amusement. Teaching. I'm still learning myself. We both are. That's the point, isn't it? There's always something new to discover when you're willing to look beyond your own limitations. As the crowd continued to marvel at their creation, Marcus reflected on how far they'd come from that first failed attempt at hand-shaping clay. They'd done more than just combine two artistic traditions. They'd proven that the future of art, and perhaps of all human-alien interaction, lay not in choosing between different approaches, but in finding ways to make them work together. The sculpture continued its eternal dance of form and quantum state, a testament to what was possible when tradition met innovation, when human determination met alien perspective, when limitation became inspiration. It was, in every sense, a masterpiece of two worlds, and a promise of more wonders to come.